Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm working on my 1991 Honda Civic and I am going to take off the knuckle so I can replace the wheel bearing. And I am going to give a step-by-step on how to first take off the knuckle, and then I believe I'll create a whole nother video using this toolkit to press out the old wheel bearing and then press in the wheel bearing. So let's go ahead and get right to it. All right, first thing I'm going to do is take off the brakes. First, the caliper. The caliper is held on by two bolts, this one right here, and then this one up top here. They are 17 millimeter, so I'm gonna go ahead and undo those to get the caliper free. These are on there with a lot of torque, so these may be a little difficult to get off. There we go. Let's crack this one loose. There we go. Once you have those two bolts out, just set them aside, put them in my parts tray, and then I'm going to place this caliper here on my bucket because you do not want to stress this brake line hose. Also, to get more slack, I'm going to undo this right here, holds my brake lines. I have Russell stainless steel braided brake lines, by the way, but anyways, I am going to undo these two bolts and that will give me more free play in this brake line right here. I've already cracked these loose. Probably should have undone these first before I loosen the caliper, but hey, it's all right. Okay, so now the caliper is loose. This is how I am putting my caliper down. I just have it laying on this bucket. This is so you do not stress the brake lines. Whatever kind of brake lines you have, you do not want to stress them. Definitely a no-no. So you could use like a zip tie it to the upper control arm or to the spring or something like that. For more simplicity, I like to just set them on a bucket. So that will work for me, but whatever way you want to do, just make sure this is not hanging by the brake line. Very important. So next step, I'm going to go ahead and take off my rotor. It is held on by two screws. Okay. If you've ever worked on brakes before, you guys know that these screws can be on there really tough. Sometimes these are rusted in there to the hub and to the rotor, but I replaced my brakes actually a week ago, so I put new rotors, new calipers, and new pads on this car, so everything is still pretty fresh. So it's gonna be pretty easy for me to get all this stuff off. Let's just, there it comes, and we have the rotor off. Not a Phillips, by the way. I forget what it's called, but it's actually a Japanese-based screwdriver. And apparently they have a little bit different of a head than a regular Phillips. Really good thing to have. I believe this is a number 3. I got it off of Amazon. It's also an impact screwdriver. So anyways, that's pretty cool. So next you can see here the hub. I'm gonna want to undo this axle nut. As a safety feature, you're supposed to notch that axle nut into the axle, which you can see is done right here. You do this a few different ways. Some people actually have a punch specifically for doing this, but what I do is I just get a flathead screwdriver, and you can see it's in a wedged shape. So what I do is well, actually I need to get a smaller one, but the idea is to put it in there and then hit it in with a hammer, and then this wedge of the actual flathead screwdriver will separate it, and that way it will create it to where you can finally loosen this nut. It is also a good idea to keep the key turned to the ignition on, because that way it allows your steering to actually turn, and that way you can move the hub either way you need it to get to parts you need on this particular job. So just a little tip there. Okay, I got my notch open a little bit. So now I'm going to try and get this 32 millimeter axle nut off. If you do not have an impact like I do, I'm using a battery powered electric impact with a 32 millimeter impact socket. So if you don't have an electric or air gun, a high-powered tool to get this off, you would need to get this off while the car's on the ground. So you'd have to take off the hubcap and get a breaker bar around this and knock it loose while it's on the ground, or else the hub will just spin if you do it while it's up in the air like this. So I'm gonna go ahead and let's see if this will work. All right. Get that nice and good on there. All right, let's get this guy off. There we go. There's a little axle nut. I have some brand new Honda OEM ones, so I will not be reusing these. In fact, you're not supposed to reuse these old ones, so we'll just throw that in the trash, and this is what we're left with. Here is the hub. All right, so now that we got all that disassembled, now we can actually start getting the knuckle undone. So there's 3 major points that it is connected to the car currently right now. The upper control arm up there, the tie rod, and it's hard to see right now, but the lower ball joint. So let me go ahead and do these one by one. I usually like to start with the lower ball joint. All right, so these 3 points, the lower ball joint, the outer tie rod, and the upper ball joint are all held on by a castle nut, which is right here, and they all have a cotter pin going through them. Well, the first thing you have to do is remove the cotter pin. Chances are these ball joints are usually stuck onto the control arms really tight, and I have to use a special ball joint separator. That's a special tool, but for now, let's go ahead and get these cotter pins and the castle nuts removed. All you need is a good pair of pliers. They are usually bent around or down or wherever on the ball joint because they're 2 parts and you're supposed to kind of separate them so they do not come out. So I'm just gonna go ahead and move this one. They're real pliable. You wanna get both ends. You wanna get them straight and flat. Just bend them. It's really easy to bend. So then I just grab the head of it and just wiggle it out. It's coming slowly but surely. Of course, as soon as I pause the camera, it comes right out, but there it is. Just for you guys who've never seen a cotter pin before, you just separate these 2 ends whenever it goes through. So that's how that works. But I have some replacement cotter pins, so I just throw these in the trash. And now we are left with this castle nut. It is a 17 millimeter. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get my ratchet and socket and take that right off. Like I said, all these are 17 millimeter. Okay, there you go. There's your castle. All right, so before we start separating the ball joint from the lower control arm, I like to go ahead and just undo the bolts for all of the ball joints like I said before. This top ball joint has a little cover on it that's held on by 2 10 millimeters, so I'm gonna go ahead and remove that. Just a little dust cover. So just gonna go ahead and put that in my little parts holder there. And as you can see here, we have another castle nut with a cotter pin through it. So I'm gonna go ahead and use my pliers to get that cotter pin out and undo that castle nut. And then finally we have our outer tie rod. Sometimes just by pulling on them through the hole that they're in, we'll get them pretty straight. See, that one came out really easy. Now, everything is loose, well, undone I should say, because these joints are super hard to get loose. Some people take a hammer. America. Sometimes you can get lucky just by hitting the knuckle and these will pop loose. Probably could, oh there we go. Tie rods are probably your easiest bet on getting them out on the first try, but the upper ball joint I say would be the second easiest, and then the lower ball joint is the most difficult always in my experience. All right, so this is my ball joint separator tool that I got. I believe I got it off of Amazon. All right, to show you guys how this tool works. So this part right here will go above the lower control arm, and then at the bottom of the ball joint, this end right here will push on the ball joint rod right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and mock this up. Make sure the ball joint is pretty much all the way seated at the very back, or else you're not gonna get a very good connection. Also, another tip, I like to put some silicone spray, just some lubricant on this end so it slides easier around the ball joint and you're less likely to rip your boot right here. I have the ball joint separator tool all mocked up. So you can see that I have it wedged between the ball joint and the lower control arm. So here is a close-up. You can see it is wedged between the ball joint and the lower control arm, and then that little tooth right there is on the bottom of that rod on the ball joint. So what you do is you just tighten this down. I'll get a wrench on this, and then this will push this up, and it will push the ball joint rod all the way up to press it out of the knuckle. There you go. Loud bang whenever that happens. So that just falls out, and we are able to lift our ball joint out. All right, so let's go ahead and do the top ball joint. Same procedure, just a little bit more difficult trying to get the wrench in here. There we go. That one was pretty easy. Okay, now let me show you guys bringing out the knuckle. It's all disconnected. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect the knuckle from the car. The axle is still going through it, so to get the axle out, I just kind of push your thumb through, push it out, and there you go. Your knuckle is free. Our knuckle is out. Depending on what you needed to get your knuckle out, if you're redoing your suspension, changing whatever, if you need to change your ball joints. These ball joints were replaced about 5,000 miles ago, so I'm not concerned about these. These are still good. In my case, I am replacing the wheel bearing and the hub while I'm at it. So that's why I'm doing this, but there are a few different reasons you may need to take this out. So if this video helped you in any way, please give me a thumbs up. Let me know what projects you got going on in the comments. As far as this video is concerned, that is how to take out your knuckle. I'm gonna go ahead and continue on with the job that I have at hand, which is pressing this wheel hub and bearing out and replacing them. I'm gonna go ahead and make a separate video on that because I have some new tools that I bought. This case right here, this is a wheel bearing removal and installation tool. So this is what the toolkit looks like, just to give you guys just a little image here. So there's that. In the video, I'm going to explain how to use all of this to easily and safely remove the wheel bearing. Because I do not have a press. If you have a press, maybe a little bit easier. Also, I had to buy this tool. This is a 10-inch channel locks snap ring pliers. So this was kind of a pretty penny for what it is, but I had to buy this tool as well to complete this job. So just giving you guys a little heads up of what's next. If you are replacing your wheel bearings, please tune in to my next video. It will be how to use all of this to remove your Honda wheel bearing. Anyways, guys, that's the end of this video. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Honda.